Amazing. So I think we can get started. So again, as I always mention, the format of these conversations is usually just 30 minutes, questions and answers. If you have any questions throughout the session, you can feel free to just drop in chat in the beginning, and then we'll try to leave at least 15 minutes for your questions. You can just unmute yourself and give your questions to Miky. So Miky, again, thanks again for joining. It's amazing to see you here. You're also a Landa member, and that's exciting. Just to start off this conversation, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, your career?
Sure, pleasure to be here. Thanks for organizing this. Yeah, so I started my career in finance. So I spent 5 years at an investment bank doing investment management, running portfolios for insurance companies. And then my kind of door into tech was at Uber after that. So I was in charge of basically growing the country, launching new cities, and then responsible for marketplace efficiency, so balancing supply and demand balance, pricing, and all that good stuff. That was 2014 is when I joined. So I was like, Uber was just taking off, launching new cities. It was an exciting time. After that, I led a trucking freight marketplace, which we built from the ground up, scaled it to about 5 million ARR, built a team of 40 people. It was a good run. It was pretty interesting, very focused niche, carrying bulk cargo stuff. It was cool. Then did a little bit more marketplaces. So marketplaces seem to be my kind of theme in my tech career. So I did logistics, I did last mile delivery. And then I started working, almost like organically started working with some of the companies that I knew. And then did a bunch of industries in the marketplaces as well, building materials, HR, wholesale marketplaces, car sharing marketplaces. So yeah, anything where there are two or more parts, that was something that I was focused. I also used to have a small business myself, so I have some experience in managing really small teams. Bootstrap budget, essentially no budget. Had a couple of startup attempts. None of them really succeeded so far. But I still have a passion for entrepreneurship, and that's one of the reasons why I do work. Why I love working with entrepreneurs, whether it's solo founders or whether it's established companies at the early stages. That's why I mostly work with. And I love it.
Amazing, man. I know you're obviously like doing a bit of consulting, right? So tell us about that journey to consulting. And one thing that we always like asking is, how did you get your first client? That's always a very, very good story.
Yeah, so I guess I've been doing consulting for about 2, maybe 3 years total. It kind of gradually came into my life. I used to have a full-time job and did a small business on the side, which I had intentions to scale it into something like a startup, or a more digitally oriented business. So I quit my job, focused on the business. The business didn't work out, and that's when I kind of started thinking about the consulting, trying to get first clients, and was able to land a couple of initial gigs, mostly through the network. Well, essentially all of my first clients came through the network, either the friends I knew or the wider network, past colleagues, managers, and stuff. The very first 2 clients that I got actually came from a friend of mine, and I guess that's also one of the interesting things, is that as long as you keep talking about what you're doing, opportunities will arise. So I just casually mentioned, to my friend, like, look, this is the thing I'm working on. I'm doing consulting, working with startups now. That's what I'm focusing on. And I think like a month later or so, he basically reached out back to me and said, hey, I think I might need some help of yours. Like, we have some product stuff that we want to do. So why don't we talk about it? So network is usually the biggest channel for consultants, not just for me, but from a lot of people who I talk to. That's kind of the similar thing that I hear.
Makes sense, man. And obviously, you've been a founder, despite it being a successful or not. You also helped scale multiple startups, to tech giants like Uber. I guess two questions I have from these kind of experiences. So first one is, like, any key lessons that you might just highlight that you learned in those experiences that you're currently passing on to founders, teams that you mentor at this point? So that's question number one. And then second, how these like experiences actually influenced how you deal with these customers at this point. I'm just curious to hear your thoughts there.
The experiences, do you mean like the larger companies that I work for? How do I translate that into the startups?
Yeah, so lessons, for example, at Uber, or just like running your companies that that now you pass along to these teams that you mentor or just solo founders.
Yeah. Well, so Uber, I guess, was an outlier in that sense, especially given that I joined in 2014. It was just kind of taking off. It has already taken off in the States, but it was taking off internationally. And there's really was a lot of energy, like you've been there as well, right? So like things were growing fast, the attitude, towards building, capturing markets, growing rapidly, doing things that are not scalable, just to grow. Like that kind of mindset obviously had a very kind of significant impact on the way I think, on the way I kind of think about growth and businesses in general. But if we talk about sort of the wisdom that I tell to the founders and the startups that I work with, my general advice is do not do things that, Uber did or Airbnb did or anyone else did, because for a couple of reasons, right? Number one, it's been a long time ago. So like when Uber started, over 10 years ago, things were slightly different, right? And like the factors that influenced Uber's success were different. Like obviously there's a lot of funding available. The market did not exist at all, right? So like we were doing things that seemed odd to a lot of people. When you hear about like Airbnb stories, they were doing a very odd thing with these kind of Airbnb airbed and breakfast thing that just people thought they're crazy. So I don't think a lot of the advice of what they've done applies to the startups these days. Especially now, like I see a lot of all these, frameworks, guides, checklists and stuff that you kind of want to follow. But the thing is, like, startups are really different. And given your particular niche that you're targeting, the skill set of founders of the team, like your approach would probably be different. So it's very interesting to kind of learn and hear all these stories, but it doesn't mean that whatever worked for Uber would work for you. So yeah, it's kind of hard to distill it to like, there's no certain path, like there's no a clear path to success, right? Like it's a winding road. So every startup kind of finds its own way, I think. And when I do work with the founders, I kind of try to see, well, what are the real sort of advantages that the startup or the team has that they can just double down on? And what are the potential obstacles that, we've seen, like things that I've seen that didn't work before and other places, like I would highlight them. But in general, I think every startup and every founder has their own path. And that's the beauty of it.
Completely agree, man. And then actually, you talk a lot about like what, the learnings that you're passed on, like the stuff that you actually did. But obviously there's a lot of mistakes around the way, right? And you've been doing this for like 2-3 years. So I actually want to drill down into this question just because you've been doing this, full time for 2 years. And I feel like we often make more mistakes than successes. I definitely stayed in that stage. But I wonder if you can share either one or a couple mistakes you made, especially early in your consulting career that you can just share with others in Landa or just the, external guests here. I think those are always like really, really good conversations to have.
I've got a lot of mistakes to avoid that, a lot of wisdom in that. So I've done a lot of things wrong, from what it seems. So, but yeah, let's start with the biggest ones. I think generally, like different people have different reasons to go into consulting. For me, it was mostly the flexibility because I didn't really see myself like consulting full time. I really looked at it as an opportunity to, have some money, help some companies, but have the flexibility to also continue doing things on my own, right? Either explore new ideas or work with sort of smaller founders that I like that don't really have a lot of cash. So which is why the mistake to avoid, number one, is if you're going into consulting, do not quit your day job before you're going into it. Try to build up the pipeline of clients, try to make sure that you have enough opportunities out there that you'll be able to actually land. That's reason number one. So don't make it sort of, I quit my job. Now I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing. All right, I need to build a client pipeline. It's going to take months to build it out, right? It's going to take you months to figure out your the niche that you're targeting, sort of the marketing approach that you're taking. It takes a lot of time figuring that out. So just don't waste your time. Try to do that as you still have the job or the cash flow. And the reason number two, I think if you're working at a interesting role, it's actually easier to build up personal branding as you are in that role, because there are certain things that you can share that you're doing in your current company that might attract some other people's attention. It could be specific to the niche that you'll be able to consult into. So I think it's much wiser to kind of build a little bit of that personal brand as you still have a day job. Then also make sure that you have clients lined up before you actually jump and take a leap of faith into the consulting. So that's my mistake number one to avoid.
Makes sense. Amazing. And you mentioned personal branding, which obviously for a lot of us, it's taking more and more relevance. You need to get out there. It's not that people are gonna come knocking at your door organically. How do you think about personal branding today? 2 years in, I see you're posting a lot on LinkedIn. How are you kind of building that persona out there, choosing the right channels, the right cadence? I'm curious to hear about your thoughts.
Again, I'm definitely not an ideal person to talk about it. I love experimenting a lot. Throughout my career, I've experimented a lot with different industries. I love changing things around. I love working on different types of projects. So I may lack consistency in kind of pursuing a particular field, a particular type of activity that I'm doing, which is why, when it comes to my personal brand, I have had quite a few different pivots. And when I initially kind of started consulting mostly full time, I was focusing on marketplaces. And I would do direct outreach to the companies, trying to do direct sales, cold outreach to the marketplace companies, kind of pitching my experience. The marketplaces back then, that was 2021, I think maybe early even 22. So the VC winter kind of started to it kind of started to begin already. So the funding kind of dried up. The companies were starting to switch into the profitability mode. Marketplaces were hit pretty heavily because a lot of the kind of up-and-coming marketplaces, it's usually very hard for them to have positive unit economics. And so their positioning, it was really hard times for them. So they weren't really active in looking for help. They were just focusing on on becoming profitable, because otherwise they would just disappear. So marketplaces didn't really work out for me. So I kind of started poking around, and I've had a lot of kind of product experience. I've led product teams before, so I tried the product approach, and I found a couple of clients on the intersection of product and marketplaces specifically. So that kind of seemed to work out. But my recent kind of efforts around personal brand really evolved around the founders, because somewhere down the line I found that I really am able to provide value to the either first-time founders or solo founders specifically. There's a particular type of founders that do something on their own, they got very specific challenges, and I seem to be able to provide value to them. And I found that through the mentorship work that I do, which initially started, as a free sort of volunteering thing, but then I found a way to make it, monetary as well. So anyways, that resulted in my focus shifting towards, first I call this side hustlers, people who are building something on the side in addition to their day job. And then even further, I found out that, actually the value is not even in helping people build something on the side, but actually working with the founders who are specifically doing something solo. So my brand have shifted, a number of times. But I mean, what I would focus on, what I try to focus on, just be consistent. I'm not very consistent in content as well. So I have these kind of sprints where I do a lot of it. I get some results out of it, but then I, switch my focus to something else. But anyways, the advice here would be experiment with different kind of positioning, know your audience really well, like know who you want to reach, and then just, be consistent with content, build on top of it. You can change. It's okay to change. It's okay to pivot. But if you're certain, if you like the niche and if you see results there, just double down on it and, do more of it.
Makes sense. Also, it's a good idea. Now you can schedule posts ahead. So once you get that inspiration, you can just do a lot of things and then just schedule it beforehand.
Yeah.
Amazing. And Miky, you mentioned obviously one of the reasons you went into the consulting in the beginning was flexibility, right? And one thing that struck out to me, from your experience is you also lived in a ton of places, right? And I would love for you to tell me a little bit more about, I guess, on the personal side, what made you move so much? And obviously, one thing that's interesting to me is how did this consulting journey adapt to that lifestyle as well? Has there been any blockers, any things to point out for people who also want to travel a lot?
Yeah, well, some of my moves were kind of self-initiated. Others were really forced. But so I was born and raised in Russia. When I was 20, I moved to the States, went to school there, had a career in banking there. That was like the second place where I lived. And at some point, I felt that I needed change. I needed to change from the career, from finance. And I also wanted to see, I guess, more of the world. Eventually, that led to the move back to Russia, where we were kind of able to explore Europe a little more. Well, actually, when I was still in the States, I also spent 6 months in India, just out of curiosity. I was able to get transferred by the company to kind of help out build some of the outsourcing stuff there. And that was a super interesting experience. It affected me personally very deeply. And yeah, that kind of just showed me, a different part of the world that I've never seen. So that I think also inspired this kind of openness to the world, to the different cultures, to the different business cultures. And then, so Uber kind of led me to Russia. I spent some years there. Then I had another startup that I led, also was based there. Then eventually in 22, so unfortunately, Russia decided to start the war, and we decided as a family to move out. We didn't support that, and we couldn't work with international clients because Russia was getting isolated at that point. So that's when we left, and we kind of traveled since for the past almost 3 years. Spent most of the time across Turkey in the first couple of years, and now are based in Mexico. Able to travel around here, explore Latin America, which is awesome. I think we'll be here for quite a while more because we haven't really explored as much of it as we wanted. But yeah, so consulting actually did play a large role in this because it allowed me to, pay the bills, be able to move and not be dependent on a location, to continue doing what I love, to continue working with clients internationally. So yeah, it kind of, that's also part of the flexibility that consulting gives you, right? Not only it gives you income, it also gives you an ability to travel. You could be traveling to clients' locations, or you could be just working remotely with different clients and not be kind of, tied to a certain location. And I meet a lot of people, even here in Mexico City, who are, working with clients in Europe, across the States, across Latin America, but are able to travel freely. So I think that's one of the beauties of the consulting, and being able to really kind of manage your time, manage your clients, and also kind of make a nice living if you're really focused on it. But sorry, for me, it was also flexibility about spending, also trying to explore my ideas on the side, trying to build new businesses. About 6 months, for 6 months during my consulting journey, for 6 months, I was also building on doing a startup, which didn't work out. We couldn't raise money, but I was basically, doing both at the same time. So part-time, half my time I was spending building the startup, and then the other half I was still consulting clients, and that allowed me, to not worry too much about the runway. Because the money was coming in, so that was a good option to have.
Makes a lot of sense. And then you obviously mentioned a lot, about pipeline, building pipeline, not like leaving before you like actually build pipeline. On the flip side, has there any, been a time in your consulting career where you maybe took on too much? I feel like that always has like some learnings as well. Like there's very low.
Is that Gabrielle or is it me?
Cheers.
I think it's
Can you hear me?
All right, cool.
I believe it's Gabriel. Yeah.
Yeah,
yes. Now
you're
we can hear you.
1 second.
froze up for a little bit. Yeah, go ahead. Then you're back.
1 second. Huh? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Cool. Now I was just discussing overcommitments, right? So has there ever been a part in your consulting career where you maybe took on too many clients, right? Where you actually overcommitted to client work, and that actually like resulted in obviously like, less client satisfaction. Like how did you actually deal with that on just kind of understanding what's the right balance for you? I'm just curious to hear.
Yeah, I personally never had a situation where I had too many clients. Like that's a very good problem to have. I haven't had that happen to me. Like I think at the most I had like 2 clients that were, significant amount of time. But then most of the time for me, it's like either one larger client and then, just several really small ones where it's just like, just a couple hours per week maybe, or even less, even like once per week. So no, I didn't have a problem of overcommitment, but I did have a problem of sort of alignment between the skills and my interests and the clients. So like I would work with a company, I would be able to help them initially, for a month or two, and then like they either might ask for a very like specific task to be done, like where basically I have to either manage the team for a while or something else. If that doesn't align to my interest, I would decline, and I had to decline before, like working with a client that just the industry just wasn't too exciting for me, and I wasn't really looking forward to manage the team for a while in that industry, and I just had to walk away from that. So I think it's important to align your interests, your passions, with the client, right? Because like if you're gonna be stuck sort of doing the consulting work that you don't really like, even though it pays well, it kind of becomes the same thing, as if you're stuck in a dead-end job where like you're not really happy. And again, like the flexibility of consulting allows you to be able to fire a client or agree to a certain time commitment and then move on. The challenge though is that you have to have someone else lined up, right? So sometimes you need to extend it to a little longer until we can find the next one. But if you have again, if you worked hard on building out your pipeline, then it shouldn't be a problem. And I would, again, if you have a choice between the different clients, definitely make sure that your passion and your interest align with what you're working on, because otherwise it'll just end up as a burnout and you won't be happy. And yeah, that's not good for anyone.
Makes sense, man. So we actually just have 5 minutes to go. So I wanted to end with some, I guess, like more personal, quick questions, if that's okay with you, Miky.
Sure. Yeah. Let's go.
I guess first one, what's your favorite book? That's always pretty interesting, and why?
Yeah, I really like biographies, especially about business, either autobiographies or just biographies. I think the most favorite is The Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. I think his journey has been really interesting. There's a lot of perseverance there. Like there's a lot of odds were against him, and he still pushed through. And years and years later, the company is obviously successful as a staple, an icon. But I think kind of started really small, and yeah, it's just a cool story.
One of my favorite books too. So second that.
Awesome.
I guess the second one is any habits that you practice on a daily basis that influence your life for the better. Maybe just pick one, because there might be a lot of them.
Yeah. I think just staying active. So I bike a lot, I even so I have a daughter, 6-year-old daughter, and we bike to school together. So she's in the back in the child seat, and so I bike in the morning and I bike in the evening to pick her up, and that's been just a cool way to squeeze in the exercise, a little cardio, and that's how I usually start my day. So I drop her off, and I'm back on work, and that's how I get energy. So either that. If there's no school, but I still need to work, I definitely, go for a walk in between meetings, because just being in meetings is a little stressful. Well, stressful in the sense that I need a breather sometimes, so I just go for a walk. Yeah, I think just staying active is really the best habit.
Makes sense. And the last one, maybe a little bit more profound, but what would be something you'd like to be remembered for? I'm curious.
Yeah. I kind of really still have hopes to build something interesting and significant. It could be a business. It could be most likely it's a business, something that impacts, quite a lot of lives, for the better. I'm all about efficiency. So I like improving processes. But in the meantime, one of the things that I really enjoy doing is working with founders, especially sort of young founders or first-time founders. And what I love about it is I'm able to unlock certain things that either help to highlight things that they're not thinking about, or just be their thought partner, right? It unlocks a lot of opportunities for them, I think. And yeah, if I die tomorrow, I think that's the thing that I want to be remembered for, that I was able to help someone grow faster, change things around to make their business more successful, and ultimately to touch more lives.
That's a great way to end the podcast. Thanks for that. I guess one last thing, if people want to find you, what's the best way to reach you? Is it LinkedIn, Instagram? Where can people find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is, I guess, where my personal brand is more prominent. So feel free to reach out on LinkedIn.
Cool. And that's just your name and your last name together?
No, it's Bayankin. Yeah, or Miky Bayankin.
Okay.
Yeah, you can just type in.
Amazing. We'll leave the link in the notes. Cool. So that's it for me. I wanted to open it up to the audience. Do you have any questions? You can feel free to just unmute yourself. Don't be shy.
No questions from my side. It's just to say thank you, Miky.
Oh, sure, my pleasure.
I have a question, Miky. What do you think? You mentioned something in your talk that with the availability of the frameworks available on the internet today, right? Things like ChatGPT and just overall AI, how do you think that impacting the consultants and our journey and the value add that we bring to the company? Because to your point, there's so much available on the internet.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I like to think and talk about it a lot. I don't know if my view kind of makes sense, but the way I think about it for myself, and that I don't think AI is really that intelligent at this point. So I think it's very efficient in what it does, right? It aggregates a lot of information, and not even aggregates, it really just sort of guesses with probability of what the right outcome to the input that you're putting in would be, right? So it's just good at analyzing all the available information and distilling it for us, into a summary, essentially. But what it lacks the creativity. It lacks the constraints of the real world, especially when it comes to entrepreneurship. It doesn't take all of the, things into the account. What is, I don't know, what are the founder, for example, what is the founder's skill set? What are they good at? What are they not good at? What's the dynamic within the team like? What's the sort of dynamic of the competitions like? All these kind of nuances, I think that it's just not able to capture it, which is why I think it's great in helping you, when we talk about the consultancy, right? It's helping you to accumulate a lot of information, Like I use it, for example, for summaries when I work with my mentees, right? So like we do the recording and then I do a summary and I use ChatGPT for that so that we can distill all my advice into like actionable bullet points. That's great. But I think humans and consultants will still play the key part in the process where like we are the creators and the curators of what information, how we filter the information, how do we prioritize the different, bits and pieces of advice. And yeah, I don't think AI would really take over in that sense. So it's just the tool, just like a calculator, right? Like calculators are smarter than human, but they only smart in like one particular thing. So the analogy that I like about AI is that it's a calculator for reading and writing, but it's not a replacement for a consultant, for a mentor, for a coach, right? It could be a substitute in some sense, but I think that even makes the sort of the advice that we give as either consultants, advisors, or mentors even more valuable because we've just we've experienced so much more than what's out there in the text form. But for all means, we should be using it. I mean, I'm using it every day, more and more.
That was my next question. Do you use it every day to help you?
Yeah, of course. It's like a calculator, right? Again, like I'm using Google Sheets, like I'm using ChatGPT as well. So that helps me be more efficient, but it doesn't take away any of the value that I provide. It doesn't replace me.
Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions, guys?
Oh, awesome. Well, I may have a question for the audience. What do you guys find the most challenging thing about consulting? Like, what's on everyone's mind? Like, what's everyone's kind of either struggling with or found a way to solve within consulting? Like, what are your thoughts about the whole thing?
I have a laundry list of things. I would say for me personally, it's always been the challenge. I'm probably similar to you in terms of being not consistent with the outreach or posting on LinkedIn. Hence, why I'm asking about the AI. Like, how do I utilize that tool to help me post on LinkedIn? Something that I just don't do. But I think filling the pipeline and really working the pipeline to get the clients has been the most probably hardest part about consulting. Once you land the client, that what you're good at, your value add, exactly what you're delivering, you're very clear about what's coming out. Once the engagement ends or around that time, this is where you really need to start thinking about back into your pipeline. And my pipeline tends to be sometimes 0, sometimes it's 10, and it's really hard. I think the ebbs and flows of consulting has been the hardest part. So not that I know how to solve it, but that's top of mind.
That's very true. That's very true. That is, I think, one of the biggest challenge, really. Like you should never stop selling. That is kind of like, if you're really serious about consulting, if you want it to be your full-time job or the thing that you do, you really need to be selling all the time. And think about the pipeline all the time. But yeah, I wasn't able to do it myself. So, but it looks like I've seen people who were able to do that.
The issue is that if you are selling the whole time, you are putting too much time into selling and not enough maybe in doing what you are selling, right? Mm-hmm. So the next step is to build a company, because you will need to hire people to do this. Someone has to do the selling or someone has to do the job.
Well, I think there are different stages of selling too, right? So I think initial selling takes most of the time. That's where you figure out your niche, figure out your positioning. And then once you kind of get the first signs that it works, then you can automate things, right? You can do automated campaigns. You can do something with the content. But it's so you can kind of put it on the sort of on the background a little bit and spend less time on it through automation. But yeah, this first stage is really challenging. It may take you a while to get there. And it really, you're right. It really takes most of your time initially. But then again, as you get more successful, I think it kind of becomes easier to an extent.
It's interesting, Marcelo, that you just said that. I was having a conversation earlier with my husband, and I said, you're really good at sales. He's a salesman. He is just born natural salesman. He can probably promote my business and me way better than I can. I told him, I said, I should just hire you. So we were just having this conversation, but you're right. I think it's hard to switch your mindset from, and I'm ops, that's what I do, right? So I'm more operational efficiency, customer success, making sure things are tight, in the back end and the back house of operations, but coming out and selling and saying, hey, look what I can do, it just does not come naturally. And whether it's in person is a little bit better, but via LinkedIn, I think it's the hardest part to do. So yeah, sell, but it does take a lot of time.
That's right. Sometimes do you have even conflicting objectives with this?
It feels like it's conflicting, right?
Yeah.
I would say though, like it's not like, again, like when I say sell, it's not just outright selling. It's not about, self-promoting and, going around and saying buy. For me, selling is also networking, being part of different communities. So sometimes just being out there, like I've landed, several different gigs from communities. Someone like communities like marketplace focused community, Landa community, other communities, right? People have requests there. So as long as you raise your hand and you talk to people and you tell them what you're doing, right? That creates more and more opportunities. That's also selling, even though like you're not directly selling. It's just being out there and having that mindset that, well, I need to be meeting people. I need to be telling about what I'm doing, and whenever the opportunity arises, they'll keep me top of mind. So that will translate into the sales. So it's not just the direct sales. It's the whole, I guess it's the mindset, but it doesn't always have to be very salesy or salesy at all, right?
Go ahead, Aldo.
Yeah, I have a question. When you have potential leads or customers that are looking for your services but are split in different parts of the world, how do you define the price of your quote or per hour depending on the region? Or do you prefer to find a company or a customer that is willing to pay your quote instead of trying to provide that service? It's like, where's the deal that in that sense?
Yeah, I actually don't discriminate pricing based on geography. It could be. I probably haven't put too much thought into that, but I just have consistent rates. Like it doesn't matter if I'm work with a client in the States or in Europe or Latin America. I don't work with really clients from Asia that much. It's just never happened. So I kind of, but I just, I price based on my value and based on my time. Actually, like one of the advices that I also hear a lot is that hourly may not be the best method of charging a client. I think hourly kind of really creates a misalignment in between you and the client, because you as a consultant want to charge as many hours as you can, and the client's really not usually willing to pay as many hours as they can, right? Like they want to limit it. So like retainers work much better in that sense, because then you have transparency, you have a certain number of hours that you are able to commit, and then the client's actually motivated to make the most use of your time. So I think it's a much better motivation alignment. But yeah, like I haven't had experience setting different prices based on the region. I did have experience, like for example, when I work with solo founders, my pricing is like really low, but that's just because I'm still experimenting with the niche, and I want to kind of scale it further. So I'd rather make my services cheaper in order to get more leads in, right? Sort of make it like a promo, and then once I have a better grasp on the target audience and the offer that I'm making them, then it'll be, then as a next step, I'll raise the prices and bring them to my B2B level potentially. Probably actually not, right? So like I do both So when I work with solo founders, I kind of treat it as a B2C consulting because I work with individuals. And then when I work with companies, it's more like B2B. So my B2B pricing is much higher than my B2C pricing. My idea is that, well, if I'm able to scale up B2C, which is really hard to do, I thought it would be much easier, but it's hard, then I'd bring the price up, right? So I think it makes sense to experiment a lot, but the bottom line is, like, especially if you're doing it full time, you really have to start with your costs in mind, with your time per hour or per month or whatever.
Thank you.
Amazing. Any last tips, Miky, maybe before you leave? Any that might be like, general tips around selling, around maybe tools that you found useful in the last couple of months? Anything that might be practical for folks here?
Look, guys, I think we're the right place at the right time, to be honest, with consulting. I think it's an emerging trend, and we are the beneficiaries of that. I love the flexibility. I love meeting and working with different companies. That just kind of enriches my experience as an individual, as a professional. So I think it's a super exciting field, and I'm super happy that we're able to do that. But it doesn't mean that contracts just fly your way. You still have to put in the work. So as anything in life, right, it's all about the balance. You got to put in a lot of work in order to enjoy what you're getting out of it. So there's no hacks or kind of shortcuts around it, but it is a rewarding journey after all.
For sure. It's an active sport, guys. So everybody, thanks a lot for joining. This has been a wonderful chat. Miky, thanks for your time. I'm glad to have you in the community.